Chapter 1. Even when fleeing for our lives, Alma's as calm as still water, Kassiana Rivernova chuckled. This thought splashed across her mind as she cascaded down the stairs and spilled onto the grated steel platform. Just ahead, her cousin and best friend, Amara Rivernova, had delicately landed and bounded toward the exit without losing rhythm. She slowed her pace just long enough for Kassi to catch up. They weaved through armored vehicles, whisked past a pair of confused Nemolese royal guards, and burst out of the gated front entrance. It was another beautiful day on Paradise as the morning daylight illuminated their surroundings, including all of their usual hiding spots. If we just get to the water, we'll give them a real chaser. Gavish Bay was only a few strides ahead. Heavy boots of soldiers drummed the path behind them. Throwing their laminated glass helmets on, the autolock sealing with a hiss, Kassi and Amara raced through the thick underbrush to the mossy overhang and dove 10 meters down into the crystal waters of the bay. For Kassi, it wasn't a clean dive, but deep enough to grab some momentum. Swimming 2 strokes beneath the surface, Kassi pushed forward as she mentally scanned her body for tension, found the source, and allowed it to release, all while taking 2 deep breaths to regain control of her diaphragm. She belted a Haraki hymn, a siren acceleration song, and lit up 2 of the 5 bulbs on her sauna pack. Unsurprisingly, Amara had already lit 4. The thrusters on Kassi's feet ignited and propelled her through the clear blue water, her body straight as a torpedo. Amara did the same, but with 4 bulbs lit. She also had use of her hand thrusters and started to pull away. "Wait for me!" Kassi shouted in Avaic between verses of her incantation. Amara veered wide to peer behind her at Kassi, who struggled to catch up. Amara slowed.
"Do you think they followed us?"
Should we check? At this speed, they couldn't twist their bodies to look behind them without spinning out.
"We're probably far enough."
They lifted out of formation, whipped their feet forward as if reaching the end of a very long jump, and forced a hard stop. Suspended in the water, their eyes darted in all directions for any sign of their pursuers. Sunlight streaked the water, giving them a clear view in all directions. There was no sign of the soldiers. Kassi heaved an exaggerated sigh.
"Ghost of Sheba, that was close."
As trained sirens, they both forced slow, deep breaths to steady their breathing.
"Let's never do that again, Kassi."
Turning off her thrusters and hovering in place with rhythmic flutter kicks. "What? It's just the Nemolese Royal Guard," Kassi shrugged.
Those were not Nemolese Royal Guard, Kassi. They were speaking English. Like Gaians.
Amara, usually so self-assured, had a look of unnerving fear in her eyes. The same look Kassi's older brother Caesar had the day Kassi almost drowned. That was the last time she had seen it, and that was 8 years ago, when she was 7. Seeing it again, now in Amara's eyes, Kassi suddenly realized something was very wrong. Then who? A flash of movement caught her eye, too quick to be marine life. Squinting, she spotted 3 soldiers torpedoing straight for them. Amara's eyes followed Kassi's. She inhaled sharply as her face went pale.
"It's them!"
Kassi's heart raced as she wondered who could possibly scare Amara like this. She tried singing, but her voice caught in her throat. Her sauna pack coughed, already exhausted of all its energy. Without another incantation, she would be a floating whale carcass. Her arms flailed as she tried to move. Amara had already powered her suit and blasted off, slicing through the water.
"Kassi! I can't see you! You with me?"
"Amma, help!" Kassi's mind rattled through her siren meditation exercises. She scanned her body for tension. Everything was tense, so she tried to focus on the awareness of her surroundings. Sight, smell, sound. It was all chaos. Nothing calmed her ragged pulse, not even the calming rhythm of their spoken Avaic. Uneven breathing prevented her from sustaining a single note that would power up her sauna pack. Without it, Kassi's only option was to hide. Her eyes frantically swept the seabed for caverns. There! She dove, muscling herself downward in her pressurized wetsuit. Stroke after heavy stroke, she could almost reach the entrance. Her fingertips stretched to grab hold of the rocky lip, when a strong hand lurched forward and seized her arm. Kassi shrieked as she spun to face a square-headed man with a flattened nose and a face like a bucket of smashed crabs. Looking into his menacing eyes, Kassi kicked and squirmed to break free. He held on, his grip like carbon steel. A woman with a brunette pixie bob and a weasel face caught up to him, swimming alongside and aiming a square-paneled, shoulder-mounted sonic cannon directly at Kassi's head. It wasn't the cannon they often used for sports. This one was military grade, the kind that could cripple or even kill. The woman's mouth creased into a thin-lipped smile. Desperation swept over Kassi as she twisted, kicking against the man's chest with all her strength. But she couldn't slip his grasp. The woman sent a high-frequency sonic pulse directly at Kassi. Thin as a needle, hot as white-blue flame. Sound pierced the helmet and ruptured something in Kassi's throat. An explosion of lightning pain flooded Kassi's body. Her neck was burning like fire, the rest of her body cold and pale as if on the brink of extinction. She gasped for air. Nothing came in. Her helmet was intact, her suit's gills still functioning. The air was around her, but her throat constricted and prevented it from filling her lungs. Kassi clutched her chest just below the helmet. Amara sped into view and spotted Kassi, terror in her eyes. She rushed to her cousin, reaching out a hand. A third soldier intercepted, grabbing her and forcing her back. She was shouting something, but Kassi only heard muted tones above her own panicked thoughts. She saw the tears streaming down Amara's cheeks. Kassi's life was slipping away. With her last drip of consciousness, she wished she could apologize to Amara for dragging her to the Rosenbridge portal. It was all Kassi's idea. Just as she was about to pass out from lack of oxygen, Kassi felt a cool stream of air trickle into her lungs. The swelling in her throat subsided just enough. Kassi wanted to quickly gulp down air, but her inflamed throat prevented it. As if disappointed to see Kassi breathing again, the square-headed man lurched forward, unlatched Kassi's helmet, and ripped it off her head. Water flooded in before she could take one last indrawn breath. Blurry vision blackened at the edges. Her body went limp as she stared at Amara's screaming face and thought of her final moments with her family. Her last words to her mother were spoken in anger. She would never get to say goodbye. Kassiana heaved for air as if she just crashed through the surface of the ocean. She blinked, feeling unease creeping in the darkness around her. With her face to the ground, sharp, broken tiles pricked the bare skin of her left cheek. Long, dark braids spilled across her face. The fog in her head slowly cleared as she sat up, her eyes straining to make shapes in the diminishing darkness. She was in what appeared to be an abandoned church with high brick walls and an arched ceiling of dark woodwork dripping in fluorescent graffiti. The cold night sky slithered through broken stained glass windows and a few gaping cracks in the walls and ceilings. Collapsed wood-carved pews and altars littered the tiled floor. Trickling water echoed in the distance, and an overpowering smell of stale urine filled her nose. It made her stomach retch. Her body gave a violent shiver. Even with her wetsuit on, it was freezing. Scheist. Where's Amara? That's when she noticed all the other teens strewn across the floor. A couple of them groaned back to life. Kassi propped herself up on her knees and squinted at the faces among the deep shadows, her vision blurred. Her gaze rapidly swept back and forth. She forced a deep breath and released the tension in her body. Calm. I gotta find Amara. Scanning again, she spotted her, passed out on the chilled floor. Amma! Kassi tried calling out, her voice barely croaking a sound. She coughed to clear her throat. Amara looked peaceful as she slept, completely oblivious. Her deep brown hair, a stylish razored comb-over bob, was beautifully tousled even now. Kassi patted her own braids. They were a frayed mess. Kassi shook her friend's shoulder vigorously and said in a vague, Amma, wake up! Amara stirred, groggy eyelids peeling open. She grimaced and focused her deep green eyes on Kassiana. such a beautiful contrast to her dark brown hair.
Kassi?
Kassi sighed with relief. "Amma, you with me?" she tried to say, but her voice was so hoarse.
Yes.
Amara sat up and studied Kassi in the darkness.
What's wrong with your voice?
My voice? Kassi instinctively felt her throat. A cold chill crept up Kassi's neck as the image of the square-headed man and the woman with the sonic cannon fought through her hazy consciousness. I drowned. How am I still alive? Kassi heaved gulps of air as if she were still helmetless underwater. Hands trembling, her body swayed back and forth, over and over again. Amara apparently noticed the abrupt change.
Kassi, you with me? Kassi!
But her melodic words seemed so far away. Kassi was suddenly tiny, microscopic, surrounded by an infinite, encroaching darkness that swallowed her up. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, as though someone else was in control of her body, and she was stuffed into the farthest corners of her mind. Panic swelled like an inflating balloon inside her chest. Amara placed a gentle hand on Kassi's back and repeated,
Breathe, Kassi. Just breathe. In and out.
The soothing touch provided a lifeline for Kassi to pull her back to her senses. Kassi listened, forcing the focus onto her breathing. After a few long minutes, her pulse evened out. The enveloping darkness subsided. Kassi resurfaced to find Amara beside her, a concerned look on her face.
What happened?
Kassi shook her head, still focused on her labored breathing. Amara continued rubbing Kassi's back as she surveyed their surroundings.
Do you know where we are?
Kassi studied the room, steadying her pulse enough to answer, I think this is Earth. It's too filthy and run down to be anywhere else. Her raspy voice poked through the silence.
Earth? How'd we get to Earth?
Amara said, her words naturally rhyming as they often did in Nevaic.
Last thing I remember, I followed you to the GDC's Rosenbridge portal.
Their parents had left Kassi and Amara at Palace River Nova while they looked into an incident at Viracocha on planet Estera with the Nemelese Royal Guard. Even though they were specifically instructed to stay put at the palace, Kassi convinced Amara to trail behind to see if they could help, or at the very least, watch and learn how their parents handled the situation. That's all you remember. They must have narcotized you. In her gravelly voice, Kassi tried recounting the traumatic experience to Amara without letting herself slip into a panic attack.
Ghost of Sheba! That really happened? I thought that was just a nightmare.
I know, Kassi said, rubbing her throat.
Kassi, I'm so sorry. I tried to help, but...
Her voice trailed off as she stared into space. Kassi heard vague stirrings from others scattered across the church floor. Amara must have noticed it too. There were at least a dozen of them wearing full-body siren wetsuits like Amara and Kassi, boots and gloves included, with only their helmets and sonopacks missing. She thought she recognized most of them from school, but the dark shadows obscured their faces. As one of them rustled and sat up, Kassi identified Max Sinclair, always the tough chaw in school, with muscles bulging out of his shirts. He was also grandson to Katerine Frisia, one of the original founders of the Paradise Planets. Glancing at the others as they began to move, she soon saw their faces and realized they all had parents or grandparents on the Council of Creators, Paradise's governing body.
How did we get here?
Max massaged the side of his head as his eyes swept over his surroundings. Kassi and Amara stood and quickly helped the others to their feet, as they all shared what they last remembered.
I was just swimming in the ocean outside our estate when I heard it.
My cousin and I were exploring the Gunda River when I heard a song.
I was retrieving a loose disc that went out of bounds when an unfamiliar song blared in my helmet.
Shh! Quiet! We were all abducted, narcotized, and brought here. And I highly doubt it's a coincidence our parents are all in the council.
And they think they can keep us? We're Nemalis, and most of us are serious sirens.
Without siren suits.
That won't stop me,
Max said, marching to the door.
Wait! This could be our only shot at escape.
Amara said, rushing to reach the door first.
We stick together.
Max nodded. Leaning into the heavy wooden doors, Amara peeked her head outside. Kassi peered over her shoulder. No one in sight. They slipped out into the windy, dark night. "Where is everybody?" Kassi asked, shivering.
Let's not wait to find out.
Amara said as she padded down a wide cement staircase that led straight into the water. Whatever street lay hidden beneath had since been swallowed up by the ocean's rising tides. There were no signs of life anywhere. Starlight frosted the vacant hills and rooftops. Reaching the edge of the steps, Amara slid both legs into the water. She touched the bottom of the water, almost reaching her knees.
Freezing.
Before anyone could follow, she was already sloshing ahead to scope out the area. Kassi jumped into the icy water and hurried to catch up. "Maybe there's a Rosencalm nearby."
If there is, it'd be up this way.
Amara pointed to buildings at the crest of a hill. They climbed up the slight incline out of the water to the top of the hill. With a better vantage point, they looked around. Whatever place this was, it clearly had been deserted for generations. They scoured the buildings in hopes of finding a working Rosencalm device that would let them communicate with their home planet of Nemal, the first of the 3 paradise planets. "There's gotta be a way back to the GDC. Maybe we can find our helmets in sonopacks." Sonoluminescence packs, commonly known as sonopacks, each contained 5 metallic spherical bulbs filled with heavy water. With a small glass window at the center, the bulbs looked like miniature old marine diving helmets. These were mounted in a hydrodynamically shaped backpack that latched on to the back of a siren wetsuit. The siren suit helmets were made of armored glass that provided a full 360 view. At the base where the helmet was sealed to the suit were the gills. This allowed the suits to breathe underwater by drawing the oxygen out of the water. Every sonopack had a built-in canteen, a hydro cask with tubes piped directly into the siren's helmet so they could drink water without having to remove their helmets.
I doubt it. But maybe there's a boat?
Amara waved them back toward the ocean. A woman's voice from behind them made Kassi jump, causing her to slip into the mud.
Even if you did find a boat, where would you go?
She said in fluent English from the shadows, her voice rich and euphonic like a prized cello at the hands of a master.
This island's hundreds of kilometers from the nearest land, and you'd have to slip past all the yachts patrolling these waters.
There was a ripple of electric snaps as at least a dozen people around them powered up siren wetsuits and beamed white spotlights on their patch of grass. Kassi shielded her eyes and blinked rapidly until they adjusted to the brightness. The night sky above was no longer visible, and the facades of the surrounding houses were pocked with deep, shadowy recesses. A woman stepped forward into the light. She was a short, curvy woman with perfectly shaped eyebrows and an autumn-colored siren wetsuit. Her brown hair, a wavy cut with curtain bangs, fell to her shoulders. She wore a bronze pendant necklace around her neck, something Kassi might see her grandmother wear, and yet this woman couldn't have been over 30. Her gaze swept over them, smiling with her chocolate brown eyes as if excited to meet them. Kassi and the others turned to run just as a cadre of heavily armed soldiers surrounded them, cutting off their escape. They regrouped and turned to face the woman. Amara stepped forward, directly in front of Kassi, as if to shield her.
Why have you abducted us?
The woman inhaled and raised both eyebrows, as if offended.
Abducted? Oh, bless your little heart. We didn't abduct you. We brought you here as our guests.
Don't listen to her, Chaz.
Max Sinclair said, jutting out his chin and folding his arms.
My father told me about her. This is Ravana, and she's raving ludicray.
There's no need to be cruel.
Ravana said, a trace of anger hidden behind her controlled voice.
We brought you here to expose you to what's really going on. Despite what your parents think, you're old enough to know now.
Know about what? Kassi asked over Amara's shoulder. Ravana eyed Kassi's burn mark on her neck.
You must be Kassiana.
She took a step toward Kassi, but Amara sidestepped to cut her off.
I'm sorry for what they did to you. We revived you minutes after you passed out to avoid any permanent impairments.
She paused as if waiting for a show of gratitude before continuing.
I told them explicitly you were not to be harmed. Rest assured, those responsible will be dealt with.
She cast a disapproving look at a few soldiers cowering in the shadows. It was the square-headed soldier and the woman who had blasted her with the sonic cannon. Despite the promise of repercussions, the woman still cast a wicked, sadistic smile at Kassi. Kassi fought down her inner trembling, her hands wringing each other tightly. Does that mean you'll heal my voice? Kassi asked, her hoarse voice quivering.
Believe me, I would.
Ravana gave a sympathetic smile. Maybe it was even genuine.
Unfortunately, none of us are skilled healers equipped to handle an operation like that.
You said you brought us here to show us something?
Max interrupted, scowling.
Yissa, we're here to show you the deplorable conditions of the Gaians, the people of Earth.
Ravana said, striding across the grass to face outward toward the ocean.
Gaians are surviving on poor food rations, living on top of each other. They're violently abused and enslaved by the You-Know. Many of them, like my father, have died because...
Ravana's voice shook, as if she were about to tear up. She paused to find her calm and continued.
Many die of common maladies your siren healers could easily cure. Meanwhile, the Council of Creators, your parents...
She turned to face them.
...rule 3 large, wealthy planets and refuse to open the portal. You have more than enough space, food, siren healers, and resources to help them. I need your help to convince your parents to open the gates and free the Gaians.
I thought they didn't want our help. Everyone knew Earth was a dilapidated planet, but Kassi had always been taught it was only because of their corruption, needless wars, and planetary negligence.
Yissa, they hate Paradisers.
They only hate you because you don't help, and because you tax them for what little they do have.
We don't tax them. Why would we? We already have everything on Paradise.
Yissa, you do have everything. And why do you think that is?
A few beats passed in silence as everyone considered this.
This is why we brought you here, to show you the truth.
So once we see this, you'll let us go back home?
I wish it were that simple.
Ravana said, lifting her eyes at the soldiers around her.
All of us grew up on Earth. We had to train all our lives and battle against the toughest competition to finally win the Siren Games and earn our place on Paradise.
The Siren Games was a global tournament held twice a year. 64 teams composed of the universe's top underwater athletes, ages 18 and under, known as sirens, came together from all across Earth to compete in 3 elimination rounds before facing off in the 4th and final round. The ship races. The first 4 teams to finish the race earned a place for them and their families on the Paradise planets.
That's the only way any of us ever had a chance of living on one of your Paradise planets. Not only is it unfair, it's dangerous. People have died in the games.
But aren't Gaians in charge of the Siren Games?
That's not the point. Are you even listening?
Ravana broke composure and heaved a frustrated sigh.
There shouldn't even be a Siren Games in the first place. People shouldn't have to earn their place on Astera, Aruna, or even Namal. All 3 planets should be open to everyone.
Why should we believe anything you say?
Max narrowed his eyes. Ravana paused for a beat, then shrugged.
You don't have to. We'll take you to the mainland so you can see for yourself.
But why can't we go back home once we see everything?
Kassi nodded, shuddering from the cold, or perhaps from the fear. At this point, it was hard to tell the difference. She noticed a few of the others were huddling in groups to share body heat. Ravana massaged her temples and turned to the soldier next to her.
Griff, do you mind?
He was only slightly taller than she was, plump to the point of slight obesity, with blonde, curly hair parted down the middle. Namal catered to such a healthy lifestyle. Overweight people were extremely rare. Kassi had never seen one up close before. In Griff's blue, bright eyes, Kassi saw sincerity as he spoke.
We need you to compete in all 4 rounds of the Siren Games.
Kassi heard gasps of protest around her. Even though Paradisers had their own intergalactic sports leagues, they all watched the Siren Games, the foremost sports competition in the worlds. The best siren athletes in all the worlds clashed in the fiercest of competitions, with the highest stakes. Winners earned a Paradise passport, granting them a place on Paradise. Griff continued.
This will prove to your parents just how difficult and unfair this is for Gaians who just wish to come to Paradise for a better life. Maybe, while you're at it, you could even convince them to accept those of us that are different. Let us into the higher planets as we are.
One thing at a time, Griff.
Of course.
Kassi nervously twirled her fingers through her long braids as the teens around her grew more vocal with their objections.
Gaians have been training their entire lives for the Siren Games.
Yissa, how are we supposed to compete against that?
I'm sure you'll find a way.
The games have already started.
You'll have to wait until the next ones.
That's not for another 6 months!
Which will give you plenty of time to see how the Gaians live.
So you're forcing us to wait here for 6 months?
Max jabbed a finger downward at Ravana, muscles flexing under his tight wetsuit. He was at least a full head taller than she was.
Didn't you just say the games were dangerous? People die in the games?
We're not forcing you to do anything. We're asking you to do the right thing and help the poor Gaians.
If you're not forcing us, then we should be able to choose not to compete and go home.
Doesn't matter anyway.
Max turned to Kassi and the others, but spoke loudly enough for Ravana to overhear.
Our parents are probably on their way right now to get us.
Your parents aren't coming for you. We convinced the Yuno to close Earth's side of the portal.
Gasps of shock echoed around Kassi.
I don't believe you!
Max whirled on Ravana. Wavy brown hair fell in front of his face as he tucked it behind his ears.
My father told me you're a liar. You lie and manipulated people to do what you want. That's what he said!
I do no such thing. Your father's the one who lies about everything. He's the reason you have no clue what's going on down here.
Take us back to the portal, or else...
Max clenched his fists, poised to charge like a raging bull.
Listen.
Griff stepped in between Max and Ravana with his hands up to diffuse the tension.
There is no need to fight.
Don't mistake my kindness for weakness, young man.
Ravana said, the corners of her mouth tightening.
I know when it comes to helping and caring for the Gaians, I wear my heart on my sleeve. But don't think for a dynamic second that makes me soft. Maybe you even think you're doing the right thing. Bless your little hearts. I can't blame you. Your parents never taught you right. But at the very least, they should have taught you that violence only causes more violence. It doesn't solve anything.
Turning toward Max, who was still coiled, she lifted her empty hands. In an instant, Max jumped forward and swiped the soldier's dull gray sonic rifle, tossing it to Amara. He decked the soldier with a right hook, buying Amara enough time to fill her lungs and burst it into a Gelt hymn, a siren dueling song. Directing high frequencies at Ravana's chest, she tried to strike before Ravana could shield and minimize the blow. However, Ravana had already drawn her sonic rifle from her holster, the mouthpiece to her lips. Positioned to defend, she performed a sonic shield that diffused Amara's attack. Ravana then launched into her own counter, firing a sonic punch that knocked Amara off her feet. She hit the ground hard, but bounced back quickly. Back on Amal, Kassi had seen her duel many times before. She'd only ever lost once. That was to Kairos, Kassi's oldest brother, who happened to be the reigning dueling champion. Amara shook off the blow and retaliated with another Gelt hymn, striking Ravana with such force that even her shield song didn't hold. Ravana stumbled back, clutching her chest, and for a moment, Kassi thought her cousin might win this. Amara must have thought this too. Others around Kassi joined in on the fray.